Previously on the Remic 2, we took a look at the Traitors, a show which took a rather familiar premise and made it one of the most engaging things on all of television. This year, it's back, and with over a year of praise regarding its first season to anyone who'd listen, Season 2 had a lot to live up to. Could Studio Lambert hit it out of the park again? Will my friends and family finally watch the show? And with the commitment to the bit so expensive I'm literally in Scotland to record this, that just begs one question.
Why did they let me on set to record this?
Now to recap, last time we took a general overview of the Traitors format and first season, and I suggest giving it a watch if you're not fully up to scratch with all that. Now for those of you who are... wow. I had good hopes going into this year's instalment, but I didn't expect it to be just as good as the first season, but on very different merits. The base concept and gameplay is still the same, but how the game is played this time is very different. Heavy spoiler warning compared to last video, as we're going to get into specifics about what makes this season just as special, but without further ado, this is the Traitors UK, Season 2.
And genuinely, how did they manage to do it again? After the first season, there was a fair amount of people saying that they should leave the season where it was, or make Season 2 with the exact same cast of people because it was just that good the first time round. I can understand that sentiment, and to a point it's a compliment. I also think it shows a lack of faith that they'll be able to capture the same magic in a bottle again. But as I said in the first season's video, this show's in good hands, so it came as no surprise when the second season had all the great merits in the casting that you've come to expect. Different age, names, occupations, backgrounds, you name it, they've got it, and yet again, it's all just as interesting to watch, although at points on slightly different merits than what you'd have expected out of the first season. Although that's not exactly a downside. I think the best parts of this show come from having the cast interact, and while at broadcast you may think it's all down to the cast, I think you need to give their just desserts to the casting team equally as much for finding such a great group of people that all had interesting enough dynamics to work for 12 episodes of TV.
No one feels like an outright copy of a contestant from last season, which ultimately does alter how the season comes across at broadcast. I liked seeing Harry and Johnny both talk about being in the army and naturally having that bond there. Meg, Charlie and Evie were all just a vibe, honestly. Whereas last season we had Alex and Tom in there being a hidden couple, this season had the world-stopping revelation that Diane was Ross's mum, but only to the audience, making for some tasty dramatic irony. I'm 90% certain if you gave Jazz 5 minutes he could solve any cold case, and Aubrey and Sonia made a lasting impression despite being the first two to leave. And then there is Paul, who was such a concerningly good traitor that played into the role clearly loving every second of it, that I was simultaneously rooting for him to go and to stay. And I like the other traitors we have this season too. Last season you heard mainly Wilf and Amanda going back and forth with being a traitor, especially as the series went on and they got closer to people. And while that was entertaining to watch, this season's traitor team you could feel were just effing loving it. And it's small things like that which will ultimately keep the show fresh. If we just got season 1 rehashed until the end of time, the show would lose its spark. But fortunately we did get something new, and I think the different flavour this season offers is just as good. If the first season is a nice light chocolate, this one is definitely a nice dark and rich one. But ultimately, they're just both as good. In my opinion, production of this season is also slightly above the way in a way I can't exactly pin down other than giving some examples. The Diane and Ross reveal to the audience was an absolute dramatic delight to watch unfold live, but the sequence that took the cake for me was Meg's murder. Now, due to how the previous episode unfolded, Meg was dead by default from the end of that day's challenge, but everyone else was under the impression it could be a 50-50 between her and Paul. But Paul's a traitor, so despite coming back from almost being banished at the round table, Meg is already dead. So, the edit starts cranking the absolute banger that is Vampire, and believe me, we'll talk a little bit more about the music later, but at this moment it really hits you in the feels, with lyrics that almost work concerningly well, castle about people you pretend to care about, I swear I've seen this before. People clearly still have their suspicions over Meg, emotions are running high following a round table, and then we get a private room clip of Meg saying she isn't ready for the journey to be over yet, even though by default it already is for her. Like, damn, you're hitting my emotions like this at the start of episode 5? There are so many little moving parts here that make those few minutes work, but I think the choice of song and footage to use solidifies what makes it so good in my eyes. It takes one thing to get the license to an extremely popular song, but another one to have the tact to identify the lyric, castle built of people you pretend to care about, when you realise the audio department are absolutely knocking it out of the park this season. Continuing the trend, the production of challenges also feels like it slightly beats out last season at points, albeit with the occasional weak links. I found this season's base design to be that bit more engaging. This is partly helped with how shields have been reworked this season, where they can be obtained in challenges if a contestant wants to take the time to get one, at risk of failing or worsening the mission's overall performance. Given how the armory was weaponized last season to rule out a whole group from murder, it's a change I can appreciate. The highlights would have to be the cabin, spotlight and bird noises missions, and I of course cannot go without mentioning the amazing production on the very final challenge that was just mwah. Now, there were the occasional moments where a challenge felt familiar to last season, particularly in the ones that were designed to stir the pot early on, but equally I didn't mind it. The mixing in of new challenges and reworking of some more familiar ones, to me, kept the concepts fresh enough. Of course, just like the first season, these all serve as team-building exercises that offer some relief from the stress of traitor hunting. Just now with a few pointers taken from the first season's reception, and I think they're all the better for it. And those lessons are on display from episode 1. There's an initial fake out to a season 1 twist minutes in, and then Claudia goes around and selects her 3 traitors. But there's now a caveat that another will be recruited that night for a total of 4. Of course, that's all kept hush-hush from the faithfuls. Hell, even the traitors don't know how many of them are until they meet for the first time. It's hard to pin down, but I think you can tell there was an ethos making this series that they weren't just going to make season 1 again. Be that in twists being repeated but shaken up or just outright omitted, I like that this still was very much the same show, but not the same season. I can confidently say that this is season 2 of the Traitors and not season 1.1 like some other shows may have tended to do. I know there's a mantra of if it's not broke, don't fix it, but equally, I think these little changes to keep the show fresh are ultimately what will allow it to stay around for years and years to come.
We do get one very interesting tidbit about how the Traitors can play the game though. It's outright said in one of the episodes for this season that the Traitors can recruit so long as there's less than 3 people in the turret, and there's no indication to as if that changes. Which, as I'm sure you can guess, as the game goes on, can put the Traitors in a very, very possible position to go with 3 Traitors into the finale. Now, it wasn't really made too prevalent in this season, but I thought it was very interesting that it was at least mentioned, and to a point, I would argue, not really changed. I may be alone in saying this, but I think lowering the count to 2 at some point, just to make sure the Traitors still have, a good chance, but not almost a guaranteed chance to go winning, would be a pretty smart change in my opinion, because even with 10 people left, you coordinate 3 votes, that's pretty deadly. Put that down to 8, you've pretty much almost got a majority. You get that down to the final 6 and 5, pretty much know the faithful of them are lost.
That said, I don't think it was exploited awfully this season, because the Traitors really wanted to do away with each other compared to last season. It doesn't feel like there's much stalling to delay an inevitable banishment, which leads to some interesting moments where the Traitors recruited later into the game realise the backstabbing that went on and immediately distrust the other members. This isn't subtle. It's very obvious who's championing for Traitors to go at certain banishments, and it's usually the other Traitors. It means that despite what I think might have been a potential good run for the Traitors, the open displays that they would do away with anyone if even the slightest friction started to show really made them crumble from the inside. It wasn't all traitor business though. Some were sussed by the faithful, even if the traitors helped further that narrative, and no better is that present than at the end of episode 6. Once again, the traitors have to murder in plain sight, only now it's much more involved. Last season was just a kiss of death, whereas this season the traitors need to find a poison chalice hidden inside a book and then make someone drink from it to eliminate them. Last season's iteration of this twist was fine, but I prefer how the extra difficulty in this one forces some more heat onto them.
The caveat to this being, the person who got murdered I would argue is the fan favourite from this season, and that's Diane. Now, as I touched on previously, she's in there with her son Ross, and they've been going undercover. But very unfortunately, the traitors picked Diane to try and poison, and she ultimately, at the beginning of episode 7, is revealed to have drank a chalice full of fizzy rosé wine, effectively having her murdered in the game. In terms of ways to go out, I don't think it gets more iconic. But marking someone for death and killing them is so last season. So the next morning, Diane actually does turn up for breakfast. The poison's a slow-acting one, meaning that she'll actually only die at the end of that day's game. That said, if we want to keep talking about iconic, leading your own funeral march for that day's mission certainly would be one. In that mission, the traitors have to try and whittle down the amount of people that could have been poisoned, and then pick between the remaining people, and if they guess correctly, they earn money! Hooray! So that's Diane out either way, but I found that very interesting, and I'd argue that it's possibly TV moment of the year, because it doesn't get any better than that, does it? I don't know if the production had this pre-planned for the poisoning, or if the second they found out it was Diane, they made an entirely new mission, because they liked her that much. But either way, it's wonderful television. And better yet, Ross is still in the game at this point, so there may or may not be a revenge plot coming into play, but if you've seen the season, I'm sure you'll know the answer.
Regardless, I really loved this twist, and also this is one of the few times I think the Faithfuls really knew who a traitor was without the other traitors really guiding them in that direction at all. As I've said multiple times, I think this twist, they saw it was good, but they used the feedback from last season to just make it that bit better for this season, and it shows. I should also mention that in the last video, I asked that the contestants were taken care of well on and off set, and with this season and a little bit of research, I was able to confirm that in fact, yes, their Welfare team is more than robust, everyone is screened before going on to the show to make sure they can handle the stress of it, and there is care there after they leave the show if they so need it. It's something I'm very thankful that is here, especially in regards to this season's results, so to see that in place, especially for a show as stressful as the Traitors can be, is something I'm really happy to see. Now, of course, we do need to touch on the finale. Now, I don't know if it was just watching it live this year, or down to how the show had been edited, but I felt really emotionally invested as we went into the final episode. The part where the remaining 5 sat down at dinner and discussed what they'd use the money for was like, you wanted them all to win and just end it there. But you couldn't, because that's not how the game works. I won't spoil the final banishments, but until the final moment I felt like the game could go either way. As arguably more crushing this year's finale was seeing people go home empty-handed, I certainly felt more invested and on the edge of my seat. Regardless of what you think about the final outcome, I think we can all agree that at least a good game and effort was made by both sides, with one just barely beating out the other. In making you want to root for almost every single person still in the game at that point, it does ultimately make the result where you know some of them aren't going to win just all the more crushing, and it is absolute gold. I don't think it'd be out of line to say that the finale was an absolute event. This was my first time watching the season as it aired, and to see the active buzz around and between the episodes was something I don't see often. I mean, take a look at the ratings and you can see it was actively gaining viewers with each episode. Most shows don't do that, but I have a feeling those that do are those that warrant people to use word of mouth to recommend it to people. Having this be a TV show was absolutely the right call to make. Everyone got the episodes at the same time and could tune in together. Of course, that naturally will lead to people hosting live watch parties and making live tweet threads to further bolster the show's popularity, but I mean, none of that's necessarily new. This is a very old trick just being used to the best of its ability, and it shows. You can't binge the season once it gets going. Everyone's on the same page, and to a point it's just that right level of FOMO where you have time before the next episode airs to catch up, but the longer you wait, the higher the chance you might get spoiled. So try and tune in live. And they sure did! I don't know which nightclub exactly was hosting a finale watch party with an offer on Diane Fizzy Rosé wine, but I sure wish I was there. The memes, as usual, were also exquisite because, I mean, would you expect anything less? And that core momentum built by the show kept going, in no small part due to the extra content we got this season. An online app was available where you could place bets on who would be murdered and banished next, and also who you thought would win. Correct guesses net you points, and that would place you on a leaderboard against everyone else playing. In addition to that, The Traitors Uncloaked began airing on BBC Two following episode 3, and featured a rotation of celebrity guests and past contestants to comment on that episode's events. They also showed the moment where the murdered and banished contestants met, revealed their roles, and then also learned who the traitors were, before they also joined everyone else in the studio for a short chat. Each episode ran for 30 minutes with extra content on BBC Sounds, and it all felt like a nice debrief and mini speculation session following what had just aired. The final episode also had a bigger set with the audience filled with the contestants, and had a marginally longer runtime too. I think with this season's finale especially, having this final episodes where the finalists show that they're all fine with each other and explain away their reasoning is a good reminder for everyone that the game is just a game at the end of the day, and can also give some insight into decisions that could have ultimately changed the outcome of the game.
Like, there is a level of catharsis, having been the only person at my bar a few months ago who had seen or heard of the show, and I spent that time recommending it to people, to now, after this new season starting, actively hearing people last Friday night talk about the show, what they think's gonna happen, waiting to tune in on the TVs that we've got. It was, like, I'm not usually one to say, I told you so, because that's petty, but like, I did. A while ago.
The first season was huge in its own right, but with what I assume to be a legion of fans going, okay, the new season is on now, can you please effing watch it, unanimously? I think it kickstarted a chain reaction, and a very well deserved, and if we're being entirely obvious, well forecasted one as well.
Like all good things, the Traitors can be experienced in a variety of different formats. You can watch the international versions on iPlayer, you can check out the original music made for the show on both YouTube and Spotify, you can buy the cloak I'm wearing off Amazon for about £30, and better yet, you could buy the board game as well, then wear the cloaks while you play the board game, and hypothetically, if any of you guys were to be going on a future season, you could play the board game while wearing the cloaks, and then, it'd be good practice. Actually, that reminds me, applications are still open. They close on the 11th of February, so if you fancy doing it, links will as always be in the description, and remember to always list your Among Us playtime as a reason that you will just make an absolutely exquisite Traitor a faithful, because clearly that worked very well for me last time.
Disclaimer, other things to possibly mention in place of your Among Us playtime could in fact be Mafia Werewolf, Town of Salem, TTT/Trouble in Terrorist Town, Danganronpa, Portal Ace Attorney to highlight your skills at social deception games or mystery solving prowess. Thank you for your understanding and lack of any comments mentioning this in the comments.
It reminded me of Among Us.
You see, Wilf gets it. Also, it's good to know other people see the Among Us similarities, because it means I wasn't insane in my branding for the first video, and actually ended up being somewhat on base. I just want to take a second to shout out another Traitors video which made me aware that that clip existed at all. It is a really cool, close to 4-hour long video that deep dives into every single episode of the first season. I found it really entertaining. And yeah, I watched that just to get more in the mood as I was getting ready to push this video out, but I figured I'd include this as a nice little aside. But as I was working on this mini section, the video finished and there was a playlist that showed up with other cool Traitors related content, and oh, that's me at the bottom. I forget people actually watch these videos, which that does raise the question, do you think any of the cast or production staff have seen either of these videos? Anyway, moving swiftly on.
But hey, what do I know? I'm very definitely clearly on set of the show, and not just on a green screen. By the way, that was actually a lie. I've been practicing on the Traitors Fortnite map. This also exists. Support a creator code in the Remit, by the way. Actually, minor tangent, I am convinced somebody in the audio department has been playing Fortnite Festival, because they dropped Vampire earlier in the season, and then as Diane is getting poisoned, they play Poison by Belle Biv DeVoe, which is also in the festival mode. And, if anything, I've got to commend them in having good taste in both music and games. And also being able to get away with that. You thought you were slick when I've been practicing your Fortnite map. I know how to spot a guy undercover when I see one.
So that's the book closed on another season of The Traitors, one I feel can equally stand toe-to-toe with the first as some of the best TV we've seen in years. With the third season currently casting and the countdown to its release already starting, I wouldn't be surprised if this time next year, close to the entire country is tuning in to see if the Faithfuls, or the Traitors, will be able to take home the prize pot once again.
But until then, with all said and all that side, I think I can hear a glass of fizzy rosé calling my name, so thanks for watching guys, my name has been Rabbit and Peace, out.
And welcome to the credits section. I'm going to keep this one brief, but yeah, flying past should be all the stuff that helped make this video possible. Obviously, credit to the people who deserve the credit for actually making the stuff I talk about and or using these videos. Second thing, God, I know this was a quick turnaround time, not only in terms of this channel, but also the season ended like less than a week ago, but we're just quick. Yeah, should hopefully have some videos coming out quicker this year. Schedule, I'm not even going to set in stone, we're just going to see how it goes. But yeah, I've got some good stuff in the works. So I'm going to stick some stuff on the end cards. Obviously, there are both my main channels, feel free to go check out either of them. Here is a playlist that just links to all the reviews I've made across any channel, and also there is the video that I made on the first season, in case you're interested. Now, using some editing magic, I should be able to swap that out after that video I plugged there, so please go give that a watch. I genuinely found it really entertaining. I watched it all in an afternoon. It's a banger, and I'm genuinely surprised they only have 10 subscribers. Of course, let me know if you've applied, I also have, so we'll cross our fingers together, and if all of us get on, all of us get on in spirit. So yeah, if you do get on and you come back to this video after you've been on the show, you can let me know that you watched this video before you're on the show. I mean, unlikely, but you never know. And with all that said, see you all next time and for the inevitable season 3 video, and yeah.